the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Supervisor Medina. Can I have a motion for a certificate of posting?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We'll move on to presentations and recognition. CEO Espinosa.
There's no presentations or recognitions, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Move on to public comment. This is the opportunity for a public comment on items not on the agenda this morning. And if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes, everybody would appreciate that.
Yes, I have some speaker cards. First speaker is Lee Skazdini.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My name's Lee Skazdini. I'm here to show support of cannabis farming in South County, down in the Hernandez area. I'm 67 years old and been ranching and farming our 800-acre ranch since I was old enough to hold a shovel. Our ranch has been in the family since 1939. My mother's family were in the first to settle down here in the 1800s. It's never been easy to make a decent living on our ground. We run a small cow-calf operation and lease out our hunting rights. The past 10 years have been especially hard due to ongoing drought and wildlife decline. Many neighbors and friends have been pressured to sell out to billionaire non-ranchers. We feel the cannabis growing business for us would be a godsend. We've already spent thousands in ground prep, and we could grow on just a few acres away from any county roads, pay thousands and possibly millions down the road to the county for roads, etc. Research shows that our unique climate in the Hernandez Valley to the Fresno County line, we could grow some of the best cannabis in the world. I strongly urge you to consider this win-win opportunity. There's really no downside to it. If the proposed tax ballot passes in June, we could still get our permits and licenses in time for a crop this year. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Sherry Skazdini.
Good morning. My name is Sherry Skazdini. I've lived in South San Benito County since 1999. We have dealt with poachers and illegal drug gardens for years in our area. When we were aware of the gardens near our home and notified authorities, it took several weeks, sometimes months, for anybody to come and deal with them. In the meantime, I was raising a young child, and there was very little presence or protection for us in our area. We have worked very hard on the ranch to be as self-sufficient as possible. We have gardens and orchards, we have raised chickens, we run cattle, and a hunting club. We have sold firewood to make ends meet, yet I still had to get a job in Kalinga so that we could afford medical insurance. My husband, along with two neighbors, ran electricity 3 miles back in 1995 just to provide electricity to their own homes. He is a longtime resident of this county. His heart and soul is this land. Now that it is legal to grow cannabis, we have an opportunity to make a living off of our ranch. We're asking to do what the cartels have been doing illegally around our property for years. We'd like to be able to make enough money to put our daughter through college and to go off the grid completely in order to fulfill our dreams of being self-sufficient on the ranch we love. We have terrible roads and rarely have any law enforcement in our area. The taxes you could collect off of legal cannabis growth could provide us with better roads and more law enforcement. Please consider letting us grow in South San Benito County. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Valerie Eglin.
Good morning, Board. I'm here for two things, to report about the cards and to make a request. These cards, which you supported, have gone out to about 23,000 households in the whole county, and it was supported by the Hollister City and the San Juan City and yourselves, the Board of Supervisors. In distributing these cards, there was a great reception. I took them out to hotels and the Chamber of Commerce, and the Hollister Downtown Association, the Community Center, and it was all received very well. Where I was particularly impressed with was like at the Cinderella Motel, I went in there and I said, well, give them a few. The lady looked at the card and she said, I got mine in the mail. I've been copying it myself to give to customers ever since. I went into the La Posada Hotel in San Juan. He said, oh, thank you. I'll put them in every room. He said, I considered making up something myself, but it wouldn't have been as nice. So the feedback I've been getting has been great from business owners, but also from the humble. People who do not have multiple possibilities for information, put it on their fridge, made comments, this is really nice, my son wants to go to all of them. It was just really heartwarming and surprising to myself because everybody said they're going to go in the garbage, Valerie. They're going to take them out of the mail and put them in the garbage. And so it tells me that there are a lot of people out there who are not putting them in the garbage, that they will do good and they will go on. Okay, second. One of the outcomes from the card was that the San Benito County Public Health Department sent me an email inquiring if REACH would partner with them to negotiate a free day in San Benito County parks for National Health Week in April. And I said, well, we don't have dominion over the state parks nor the national park, but I can go to the Board of Supervisors and I can ask for that day. And I said, the only charge that I know of is parking at the historic park. And I said, but it's a shot in the dark. And then I said, we need to do this for the whole week. Therefore, I request that the consideration be agendized at your next scheduled meeting in solidarity with the Public Health Department and REACH San Benito Parks Foundation for National Health Week. It's a positive action to reinforce and confirm the county's intent of maintaining parks in this county to promote health and wellness through parks and recreation.
Okay. Thank you, Valerie.
I will leave a copy of this for reference.
Marty Richmond?
Good morning, everybody. Marty Richmond from House. So first, let me congratulate Supervisor Rivas. I saw this morning he got an endorsement from his party for running for assembly, and I want him to, before he leaves for Sacramento to take his new job, I want to make sure he gets the biggest wheelbarrow in town so he can fill it with cash and bring it back. His suitcases are not going to be adequate. So remember us, would you, please, while you're there? The second thing is, last night the City Council in Hollister adopted the endorsement of the Keep California Safe proposal for a proposition to correct some of the grievous errors in Prop 47 and 57, specifically for people who are violent criminals and are getting out of jail early. those two propositions prove that it's really important that you read what they say, not just what the name is. So I would hope that the Board of Supervisors would also endorse it. Obviously, you want to get the opinion of the sheriff. I don't know if he's taken a stand on it yet, but essentially crimes such as drive-by shootings, rape by intoxication, human trafficking of a child, and many, many others, just a whole list, because of the poorly written propositions 47, 57 are not considered violent crimes. They are violent crimes, and they should be treated like violent crimes. I am not interested in putting some kid who lifts a magazine off a rack in prison, and that's what those were supposed to do. But unfortunately, like so much legislation we have in this state, things are poorly written or they're hidden 47 paragraphs down, and you find out later that this is what you got. So this is an attempt to make those corrections and to keep violent criminals locked up and not release them early on technicalities. It also has a provision for serial property crimes people. As you know, now unless you take over $950, basically you get a get out of jail free card, and you get that every time. This would change that, so the third time you're convicted of a property crime, you get up to $950. You get to go to jail. It also would allow you them to take DNA samples of people who are convicted, even of minor crimes. And DNA also convicts the guilty, but it also gets the innocent out of jail. It's a good thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Medissa. Okay, right, did I?
Yeah, it's fine. It's Mandisa Snody. Good morning to the board. I spoke with Kim Stone, I think, is your lobbyist, and I had some conversations with her regarding the bills that are cannabis-related, tracking at the state level. So two that I would like to really bring the attention of the board is AB 2810, which would be to establish the Sun-Grown Cannabis Commission. So this would be a state marketing program specifically for sun-grown cannabis, which means open growth cannabis. The other part of this is that there is mandated state appellations of origin program and county of origin program that are written into Proposition 64. I would really like to see San Benito County be an opt-in county for these type of programs, marketing exposure, creating a distinct area for and branding for our county. Could help our businesses and our potential local industry be able to thrive. Also help our traditional farmers, family farmers who've been here for generations, who want to be able to have a healthy, thriving business. It's Senate Bill 930 is an intent to establish a state chartered bank. There's also 1409, which would ease restrictions for hemp cultivators. 1302 prohibits a local jurisdiction from preventing deliveries to happen into their jurisdiction. AB 2914 would prevent retailers from being alcohol and tobacco retailers, so you can only hold one or the other license. And then AB 2641 is special importance of cultivator sales at events, which would open up the cannabis event space outside of just agricultural zoned areas. So right now, for instance, they can only have them at like county fairgrounds and things of that nature. So being able to participate in potential tourism revenues and potential event revenues, I think would be really important for our county and for our businesses to have the option to participate in if they so wanted. So I appreciate the board continuing to make considerations and continue to study and continue to form opinions and to learn, because this is definitely a changing landscape. And I just want to thank you for your time in salsa. You'll hear from me again today. Do you have a question?
Thank you. Supervisor Medina?
1409, was that a Senate bill?
1409, Senate Bill.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Senate Bill 1409, Senate Bill 1302, Senate Bill 930,
Thank you.
and the other four were all Assembly bills.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rocky Evans.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
I'm retired 2 years ago. Had a partner, a next-door neighbor that was in cannabis growing business. Got in with him, and for the last 2 years, done all the rules and regulations that's been acquired by law. I have a wife that hasn't worked in 10 years due to health. This has been pretty much a godsend for me. And we're down South County, Hernandez Valley, 2 years. We haven't had any problems. We want to work with everybody with whatever we have to do to stay on top of this. And I'm just here to voice my one opinion about it. It's a thing that's really helped me and my wife, and I think it's a win proposition for Hollister, because there's money there for them too. It needs to be a mutual situation where everybody works out for their own, it benefits everybody. I'm just here to ask you to reconsider South County. We're out there. Nobody bothers us. Nobody cares. We're off the grid. You can't even see it. You can't smell it. And we don't have any problems with any of the neighbors. We have neighbors that want to come in and actually cause a group in that area, which would be beneficial to everybody. So that's all I got to say. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have no other speaker cards.
Okay, anyone else, last call for public comment?
Yeah.
Please step to the podium and state your name and address, and then fill out the yellow card after you're done speaking, and hand it to the clerk, please. Thank you.
Doug Burkett. This is my father, Richard Burkett, also. I don't know, can we both stand up here? We've been historic ranchers out there in the South County. We've been there since 1934, and with this whole new type of agricultural business that could come up for us, it's been an actual godsend, just like Rocky has said. There's quite a few of us from the South County that are here, kind of representing our area, to ensure that we can find a mutual agreement to be able to do what we want to do, is be able to grow, and instead of working our asses off and making it barely each year. This could be a great opportunity for us and a great opportunity for you guys for taxpayer monies. We've got no problem paying our taxes if we can make the money also. Anything?
No, I was going to say Doug is fourth generation now, and my grandfather is the one that established the ranch back in 1934, and we've gone from turkeys at that time to hogs and then to cattle, and that's what we currently do. We're just cattle people, little cow-calf operation. And it is tough. I mean, this drought really has taken its toll on our grazed lands. We can't raise as much cattle as that we would like to be able to do. And, I'm finally came over to the other side realizing that this is a great opportunity, not only for the rancher themselves, but again, as my son has mentioned, the tax revenue that this can generate for the county. I mean, we pay a lot of property taxes, and we got a road that has more potholes than you can imagine, just trying to get in and out of that area, that we can't seem to, get a decent road, and we do keep to ourselves. We do not have that many problems. And we don't foresee any problems for the county. I mean, if the sheriff's worried about being able to get down there, well, there's only one way to Kalinga and one way out to King City. And so, they could probably be tracked down rather quickly. That we've had dealt with poachers and things in that way that have worked out because they're easy to catch because you just can't get out of that area. So we obviously would really hope that the county would reconsider and look at us as being able to create some revenue for the county.
Okay.
We thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and move on to department head announcements. Mr. Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we do have some announcements this morning. We have an announcement from our librarian, Nora Conte. I'd like to invite her up.
Good morning, board members, members of the public, and the community that's listening to us at home. It is a beautiful day today. The sun is shining, and it is warmer today, so I'm really happy about that. Couple of announcements. I'd like to invite the public to visit San Benito County Freelibrary.org. That's fbcfl.org. We do have zip books that are now available for the public. For those of you that may not know what zip books are, if you visit our library or you're online and you do not find the book that you're looking for and we do not own that book, you can go ahead and fill out that very simple form and order the book. We will then take your form from online, we will order the book, and it will be delivered free of charge to your home. After you're done reading with it, you can return it to the library. That's a zip book project. On the 24th of this year, we're going to be having a passport fair at the library. Last year, it was over 600 passports that were generated from the library. People were able to come in and apply to get their passports. So there's an overwhelming demand, so we're going to look at a passport fair where individuals come into the library, they bring their documents, and they can apply for their passports. Also, I'd like to invite very warmly and very specially the board members, members of the public that are here, and those that are listening at home to the Friends annual fundraiser. It's called Tea and Treasure. It's March 18th, 1 to 3:30. A lot of fun. You get to see your neighbors. We get to talk to each other and just have a wonderful time, and it brings business together along with the library and the Friends because they make huge contributions to this event. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you, Nora. Yes, we have another announcement out of our Treasury office, our tax collector, treasurer, Mary Lou Andretti.
Good morning, members of the board.
Good morning.
And esteemed public. As time for filing to run for elected office is coming to a close on Friday, March 9th, and after much reflection up to the very last week, I have finally made my decision not to run for office again. So, February 7th marked my completion of 35 years of service. I'm a little nervous.
That's quite all right.
So, that's it. I had more, but I can't do it.
Yeah. Well, Mary Lou, the Board of Supervisors absolutely thank you for your valuable service for 35 years. To me, that's quite amazing in any profession, much less, in public service. And it's a hard job at times. And we certainly thank you for everything you've done.
All right, we have another announcement out of administration. I'm going to invite Louis Valdez.
And before we're done with it, we certainly need to make sure we recognize the treasurer with You know, one of those plaques that everybody values that once put on their wall. And so
we'll make sure that happens.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. One announcement from administration. We have made arrangements to meet with representatives from the city of Hollister this coming Thursday at 1:30 p.m. to discuss the Animal Control Services agreement between the city of Hollister and San Benito County. I know that this has been a topic of great interest over the last couple of years for the board. We will be meeting with representatives from the police department, Mr. Reynoso, who is the acting chief at the present time, along with other representatives from the city, will be present. So we hope to bring an updated, either an updated agreement or an update to the board at the next board meeting this month. So we wanted to make the board aware of that, and we are on track to get that done.
Thank you.
And I thank John for that background music. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. I wanted to remind the board as well, we have a special board meeting next week. That'll be on Tuesday, 9 o'clock here. We're going to be discussing the budget, our first meeting of a series of 3 meetings, and you'll notice that on the calendar in light green for March. So I just wanted to keep the board mindful of that. We have a lot of enticing and invaluable information concerning CalPERS and pensions, what's happening with that, as well as the budget itself. So look forward to that. Want to remind the board. One other thing I like to do, another, I think, very important office that needs to be filled is our clerk of the board. So I wanted to ask Janet to stand, please, and I wanted to congratulate her. She is now officially our new clerk of the board. So she's she's been an assistant clerk for many years, and we are very glad to have her in this role. So thank you, Janet.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very proud that you took the job, and it's in great hands. So thank you.
I look forward to it.
And the last item I have for the board is we would like to go ahead and pull item number 8. There is some additional information that is required, so we'll be hearing this item at a later board meeting.
Okay.
That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, very good. Move on to board announcements. Supervisor Medina.
I have none.
Okay. Supervisor De La Cruz.
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
We're going right through the board announcements. Supervisor Rivas.
I did have one announcement just to remind people who want to volunteer. An opportunity to volunteer will be Saturday, March 17th at Pajaro Ranch here, I believe in the San Juan Romas area. And so certainly it's an opportunity. It's just a Pajaro Ranch work day. It's an opportunity to work on the ranch and kind of give back. I think they're going to be planting some trees in an area there on the ranch. And so certainly I encourage you to visit their website where there's more information.
Great. Thank you. Supervisor Munzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have several announcements. Monterey Bay Air Resource District had its monthly meeting last week, and similar to the issue sometimes with our landfill, the Marina landfill had complaints from the neighbors about smells, and so staff gave a report on the ability of the air district to monitor issues with dealing with smells, in this case the landfill, and I know I've had them here looking at farming operations that dealt with turkeys and stuff, and it's a very difficult issue to monitor. So that report was given. Also, I believe last week the CAO and myself took a tour of the child support services. It was very enlightening. I assumed I knew what they were doing out there, but they kind of informed me more of what they did, how their funding works, and it was very informative, and I want to thank staff for giving us that tour and giving us that update. Also on Saturday, I attended the West Hills Water Treatment Plant, their open house, and having served on the governance committee for several years while we were developing that project, it was good to see it actually up and running, and it's impressive facilities. And I know it's been out in the news, but I want to remind the public of the hard closure of Highway 25 tomorrow between Hollister and the 101. I think it's tomorrow and Thursday. It's going to be a hard closure. So our commuters are going to have to find an alternate route. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you, Supervisor Munzer. And, you know, with the urban supply water plant being up and running, that really eliminates the need for softeners and, you know, people buying salt and so forth. Hopefully that level of education gets out to the public, that hopefully their water quality is be substantially better. And I want to, kind of add on to Supervisor Munzer's announcement with the Highway 25 closure. It's really bad news for our commuters. It's basically, the way I see it, the railroad just didn't want to pay the overtime on to do the work on the weekend or at night. But tomorrow, the highway will be closed from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. And the detour route is to be Bloomfield Road, around Fraser Lake, back to shore. And so our county roads are to be a mess. I think 156 will be a mess. San Juan Valley will be a mess, and it's really too bad. And Thursday is 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Is the closure time, and hopefully they are able to keep up on that schedule. The county did everything it could to try to persuade, a change in time, but really we found out on Friday, and that's the way it's probably work out. I attended a San Bernardino Arts Council breakfast workshop a couple weeks ago. It was very good. A lot of community leaders were there, a lot of educators emphasizing the need for arts in our schools and access to arts programs for our young people. We saw some demonstrations. Superintendent Lamano had a great speech, as well as the Hollister School District Superintendent Andrews, and it was very informative. I was happy I took the time to attend that event. And walking away, they had a free gift, a rock. And I'm going to keep it on my desk to remind me of the importance of the arts for young people. And I guess it has a secondary use, too. If you get too many rocks thrown at you, I got one to give back. And I also attended this past week the Silicon Valley Cannabis Business Roundtable. I want to thank Victor Gomez for the invitation to this event, and it kind of focused on more of the state regulations that are being developed. Right now, the state has some emergency regulations in effect, and they continue to iron out the long-term regulations, and it's too bad some of the folks that spoke in public comment left a little early, but there's nothing easy about this industry. There's to be a lot of controls at the state level, as well as if we move forward with this, there's to be regulations at the local level. And there's nothing easy about it, and that's just it was very informative to me. I continue to learn about the issue, and I think we all will. There's no real bona fide experts in it yet. So with that, We'll move on to consent agenda. Anybody from the board would like to pull any of the items?
6 and 7.
6 and 7 by Supervisor Medina. Any other board members?
Mr. Chair, I don't want to pull it, but I just want to recognize and thank Mr. Paul Haynes for my representative to the Park and Rec Commission. We have been friends for a long time, served on Trustee School Board together, and I very much appreciated his willingness to serve.
Very well said, Supervisor Munzer. Anybody from the public would like to pull any items? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve amended consent.
Do I have and a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We'll move on to item number 6. Supervisor Medina.
Yes, I'm not contesting this or even elaborating on this item. I just want to explain to everyone out there that Joe Paul and staff, along with the elected officials, we do look at these things and try to go after grants and improve our bottom line by doing things that are smart and analyzing the certain situation. So I just want to compliment Joe Paul and give him accolades where they're due. So if you want to talk about it a little bit, you're more than welcome.
Thank you, Supervisor Medina. Joe Paul Gonzalez, County Clerk, Auditor, and Recorder. The item that the supervisor is referring to is a grant of $10,000 from the Election Administration Commission, which administers the Help America Vote Act grant funds, which are federal dollars. And our office applied for the grant funding, and we received this $10,000 grant. We'll use it immediately to pay for the new election equipment that our voters will see at the June primary. And it's specifically for voters with special needs. It allows them to vote unassisted. And so it's, when the public sees our new voting equipment, they'll be very, very happy with the ease of use of the equipment and the fact that everything produces a paper ballot. That's about it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We move on to item 7. Supervisor Medina.
Yeah, I just want to bring this one up. I think it's one of Barbara's or Ray's. When we're talking about business and we're talking about different ways we can create revenue rather than just taxing our residents. This is a perfect example. I know, Mr. Bertello, you were involved in this also, is looking at different ways to bring in business. I believe you had looked at 101, and we are looking at $120,000 investment, and it will be reimbursed when things move. But just to give you an idea of $120,000 that we spend, if we look at, let's just say there's a couple of gas stations that arrive on this property, based upon $3.50 a gallon, that's 34,285 gallons that we would need in order to come back. You look at that, that's 18 gallons per vehicle. So it's about 1,904 vehicles to fill to really almost break even. So I look at this saying we have to look at it this way. We have to sometimes invest in the future and take these monies like Mr. Supervisor Bertella did and push staff and do this type of work. So if you want to just explain to everybody what we did, and that would be great. Thank you, Supervisor Bertella.
Thank you.
And I can elaborate. There's been several property owners that have come forward asking that that they begin this work for, they're interested in having projects develop along that, but they need to implement the zoning ordinances that would implement the county's general plan. So under this reimbursement agreement, they have a scope of work from EMC that's going to come to the board at a future agenda, either at the special meeting next week or on the 20th. And that scope of work has been scoped initially at $80,000. We've built in a contingency for $16,000 that could, hopefully they'll be able to keep it to $80,000 for the work that's been proposed. And this reimbursement agreement is where the property owners that are involved are going to put up the money to both pay the consultants and staff costs. But because part of the work is going to be implementing our general plan by having the zoning ordinances go along with it, that we have under this under this reimbursement agreement indicated that staff costs are going to be capped at a percentage of the EMC costs. So initially we have that capped at $20,000, and then with a contingency of $4,000 for staff costs. And that's if it goes over that, that would be the county's investment in this process to make sure that we can implement those zoning ordinances so that the project can move forward in a timely fashion.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to add a few more comments with regards to that. It's just really a great win-win, I think, for the county. We are actually receiving some help to implement our general plan, which the board has given us direction to. Obviously, with the lack of staffing and funding and many other things, it's kind of dragging on. But this definitely helps us move us in the right direction, and it's truly a win-win. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Espinosa. And yes, I'm pretty excited about this opportunity and to be able to move those commercial nodes forward. I think we're seeing an application very shortly at Bettable Y Road to generate, tax dollars and revenues and jobs, and it's pretty exciting. Any other comments from the board? If not, I'll move it to a public comment.
Thank you.
Good morning, Marty Richmond again. When you were doing your general plan, this idea for the nodes came in right at the end. I don't know if you remember that. I was sitting around and trying to follow what was going on with the general plan, and I thought it was a brilliant idea and that we should have done it long ago, and I am disappointed that it's taken so long to get to this point. But I do hope we get moving. The public has to realize this is a long-term investment. I mean, this may look like a bit of money up front to be paid back later, but you're talking about something that goes in there, it's probably going to be there for 30 years if it's there for a month. And so for many commuters or people using 101, not commuting, not living here, their only time they touch San Benito County is when they ride through on 101, just that little stretch of 101. And, most of them have a wallet in their pocket, and we'd like to help them get better gas mileage by lightening that wallet a little bit as they go through San Benito County. And so why should they buy gas in Santa Clara County or in Monterey County when they can buy gasoline, and once they stop, people often buy other things here if they had an opportunity. Right now, they couldn't buy it if they wanted to. They'll get off 101. Sorry, too bad. You could even have public bathrooms where people could stop and use that. You'd be surprised how popular they are along the freeway. So I'm in support of this. I think I'm glad we're moving, and we need to keep the pressure on. We need to say to people, if you want to invest, we're here to help you, but you got to get moving, because if you're not going to get moving, we're going to go with somebody who is going to get moving. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Thank you. Move on to our regular agenda. Mr. Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, as I mentioned at our last board meeting, we invited Tom Habashi here today, so I'd like to invite Tom up. He's our CEO for our Monterey Bay Community Power JPA that we recently formed with our surrounding counties, Santa Cruz and Monterey County. He's done a fantastic job up to date. He's done a lot of work. And there's a lot of technicalities behind the scenes that not too many people are aware of or even familiar with. So I was hoping that he'd be able to come today and enlighten the board, enlighten our public, enlighten your constituents on kind of what's transpired so far, and maybe he can highlight a little bit about what when he lit a lantern up last week. We had Supervisor Munzer there as well, and a few other things. So, Tom, appreciate you coming.
Welcome, Tom. And I know you're a very busy person.
Thank you very much. Never busy to address any of our counties. I appreciate you inviting me in, and I do apologize for missing the meeting last week. The only excuse I can come up with, we were only one day away from launching, and things were busy back then. We are in business now, have been for the past 5 days, and counting. All right. Oh, did I get that right? Okay, I think I'll do this now. No, I think I'll work it.
Well, let me expand it. Okay. Right here. There you go. There you go. Just hit the enter button.
Oh, got it. Thanks. Okay, let me just start by describing who we are. This agency is made up of the 3 counties and all the incorporated cities within the counties, with the exception of 2 cities, King City as well as Delray Oaks. How did we get here? It started with the County of Santa Cruz looking into a community choice aggregation program, and I'm going to describe what that is later on. Through a number of planning processes as well as technical study, feasibility study, eventually after 4 or 5 years of work, in March of 2017, the agency was formed, and it took him a few months to bring me on board, and we started working around September 1st of last year to put the agency together. How are we governed, or how we are governed? We are made up of 2 different boards, Operations Board and Policy Board. Each board have 11 members. There are 6 permanent members made up each of one of the county, one official from each of the counties on the Policy Board, and the 3 cities that also have permanent members are the City of Santa Cruz, City of Watsonville, and City of Salinas. The other 5 seats have rotating members, and each seat will have either 2 to 3 different cities that make up that seat, and they get together and they decide among themselves who's going to be representing them. Generally, this is how the organization is structured. We have the Policy Board, the Operations Board. I report to both of them. We got a general counsel right now that's on a contract position, and that may change in the future. We have a board clerk as well as executive assistant in one. There are 4 areas that we have in this organization: marketing and public affairs, power supply resources, internal organization, which is really made up of finance, IT, as well as HR, then finally regulatory and legislative. Altogether, this agency is not likely to be any more than 20 to 25 people. All right, now we get to what is it that we do. We are in the business of acquiring electricity on the wholesale market, selling it retail to the people that live and do business in our service area. PG&E will continue to provide the transmission service and distribution service of the electricity. They also do the billing, the metering. They're still in the energy efficiency business. They also handle the low-income programs and a number of other programs. So the only thing that we are carving out of the business is the generation side. All right. Why did the 3 counties decided to come together and form this agency? Well, we have a number of values that we believe that we can expedite and move quickly. The most important is clean power to the 3 counties, and we are starting at 100% carbon free. That 100% is made up of 30% of it is renewable resources. Are solar and wind, geothermal, and others. The other 70% at this point is carbon-free, but it's coming all from large hydro resources. Another value that we hold dearly is affordable rates. So we want to make sure that the rates that you pay for the generation services are lower than you would otherwise pay to Pacific Gas and Electric, and you want to make sure that that continues on for the foreseeable future. Just to emphasize or talk about these 2 different points, if you look at this graph, on the left-hand side, you can see PG&E's resource portfolio mix. It's about 69% carbon-free, and that's counting nuclear power that they have. Nuclear power is considered carbon-free for Pacific Gas and Electric, and the rest is what we call gray power, which comes from natural gas, as well as other electricity mix that are unidentified. For us, we are sourcing 100% of our resources from carbon-free resources. Just looking at the total cost, the outer circle makes up the total cost of electricity that you would pay, and these are not exactly to scale. For PG&E, there's a combination of transmission distribution charges, then the generation charges, which include, of course, any of the stranded assets that they have on the generation side. For us, now that we are in operation, they still get to collect the transmission and distribution services cost. They also will charge us an amount of money to pay for some of the generating resources that are not economical. So basically, they make the other customers whole, because at one point or another, they committed to buying resources to serve us, and now these resources will be sold in the market. So they collect the difference between the market prices as well as the cost of these resources. And what's left is the money that we will end up getting, which is really about 70% of the money that the customer will be paying for generation. And some of that money will be given back to the customer in rebates at the end of the year. For residential customers, that will be once a year. For other customers, large customers, it's likely to be quarterly or twice a year. Other things that we want to emphasize as part of our values is local benefits. Obviously, I don't think it's enough to provide just greenhouse gas free or to provide lower cost. I think we need to invest in programs for the people that do business and live in Tri-County. So we will be supporting a lot of programs, hopefully in the future, as soon as we actually begin to make money, which we haven't yet, by the way. It will take us a couple of months to get there. We will start implementing programs that will benefit our local areas. And in fact, we are started already to sort of survey customers out there and county officials to find out where are the issues and where are the gaps that we need to fill in that now are being left open by Pacific Gas and Electric. Finally, the last value we bring, which is something that you never had in the past before, and that's customer choice. You can actually be our customer. You can choose other products that will allow you to put some of the money that we're going to give you for rebate to fund programs that we would like to have in place, or you can opt out and stay with PG&E. So what's the program? The program comes in 2 phases. Phase 1 started already March 1st, and that brings in all the customers except all the residents. So every industrial, agricultural, commercial, all the customers come in except for residential customers that comes in phase 2. The customers will come in during the month of March, and the cutoff point is usually when their meter is read. So once their meter is read, they become our customer from that point forward. And during the month of March, all of the commercial customers are going to come in. Then we'll take a couple of more months, and we'll bring in all the residential customers during the month of July. Same setup. Okay, some of the things that have happened already. Obviously, there are a considerable amount of work that takes place in order to put an agency in place, and there are quite a few of them out there. In general, most of the agencies that were formed in the past 7 or 8 years, it takes about a year. We've done it in 6 months. I had the benefit of doing the same thing back in with Silicon Valley, so I knew a thing or two to try to speed up the process. The implementation plan was submitted first to the CPUC that basically say this is how we're going to do business, and to the extent that they accept it, they have 90 days to verify and say we accepted it, which they did in November. After that, you have to sign an agreement with PG&E because now they are our partners. They're going to be collecting money on our behalf and remitting it to our banks, and we have to work together all the time. And finally, we register with the CPUC, which we have done that already. To put the organization together, we've leased an office. It's at 70 Garden Court in Monterey. And we've hired a number of full-time staff. And again, by the end of 2018, I'm looking forward to probably have maybe around 20 to 25 total number of staff members. We worked with a bank to get a line of credit. As you probably know, none of our members, they basically said, you're on your own. We got you in place. Now go out and borrow what you need to borrow in order to get the program going. And once you do, then once we could start to collect money, we'll pay off the bank for the line of credit that we have in place. We also got some help from the county of Santa Cruz, and we're going to pay them off as well. We anticipate that everybody's going to be paid off by October of this year. We hired a data management. Those are the people that stand between us and PG&E when it comes to collecting data and giving data back to PG&E so they can bill customers and receive the money, and the money gets remitted to us. And the data management people are the ones that are going to be in between us and them. It's a considerable amount of data that has to be collected on daily basis. We've also hired a power scheduling support, and that is the group that will be between us and the suppliers, because we have now about 8 to 9 different suppliers that will be sourcing our energy. And we have signed a number of short-term agreements, somewhere between 1 to 5 years, and we are in the process of negotiating 3 agreements for long-term contracts with a number of developers. All of them are renewable resources. 2 are solar plus storage, and 1 is wind project. On the marketing side, we've provided a first and a second notification to our customers, the ones that we are phasing in March. We're going to give them again a third and a fourth notification 2 months before, 2 months after they are phased in, to give them an opportunity if they want to opt out or opt over. If they don't want to do anything, if they want to be our customers, they don't have to do anything. To the extent that they stay with us and later on, after 2 months, 6 months, 10 years down the road, they decided we want to opt out now, commercial customers will pay a one-time fee of $25. Residential customers will pay a one-time fee of $5. We have been having a lot of meetings, especially with our customers and commercial customers. They make up a good portion of our customer base and our revenue, basically. And we want to do everything that we can in the future to make sure that this group is happy and satisfied and staying with us and basically keep on farming. All right, dollars and cents. This describes the next 3 years of what our projected revenue looks like and where that revenue is going to be going. In the first year, because it's a partial year, 2017, 2018, by the way, our fiscal year starts October 1st and ends September last. So this first year is going to fairly be short. So we're collecting roughly, now I'm going to have to put my glasses on. Roughly, let me see, I think I'm going to have to go back one.
Up arrow.
No, I think we're okay. The net revenue that we're gonna bring in the most sizable portion of it is gonna go to buy power supply. Additional operation cost will make up about maybe less than 5% of the total revenue collected. For the first year and for the following 2 years, we are going to end up with a net revenue that looks pretty healthy. That doesn't consider the possibility that the portion of the generation cost that PG&E will be collecting to make up for their investments that are not paying off is going to stay constant. Now, it hasn't stayed constant for the last 3 years. It's been going up and up. And we are doing everything possible to try to keep it, put a cap on it, or reduce it if we can. But these figures that you see in front of you projects that money that they're going to be collecting from us stays steady. So it looks like we're going to end up with a healthy net revenue. For the first couple of years of operation, it's going to be very important for us in order to build the credit that we need, that we keep a good portion of that money in reserves. We're hoping that by the end of the second year, we'll have sufficient money in reserves to meet 50% of our operating expense, which is the comfortable level that I can say we'll be able to get a credit rating if we keep that kind of money in reserves. So this is how the money that the net revenue is going to be split over the next 3 years. Reserves will be the largest chunk in the first couple of years. There will be cash rebates in the first couple of years. That will be $4 to moving up to $12 million, eventually up to $22 million in the third year. This is
so, Mr. Abachi, I got a question right here while you're talking about reserves.
Yes.
I know for our participation in all the jurisdictions, participation, we have to identify some cash that kind of is the money that kind of start this thing up. Would we be able to roll back? Go ahead, Mr. You know where I'm going with this question.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. So, Mr. Hibachi just mentioned that a few minutes ago with regards to October, paying back the jurisdictions that actually infused funding to start this up. Our figure, I think, was about $500,000.
Right.
So in October is what Mr. Hibachi is explaining, is that we should probably be credited that money about that time frame. So, again, it's... there's probably going to be fluctuation in time and probably not exact science, but probably around there, I think, is what he's referring to, that we would receive some funding back.
Yeah,
Santa Cruz put some more money for the operations. They put a significant amount of money into the organization earlier.
I can speak to that. I think the money you're speaking of is the money that was collateral that been put by San Benito in order to guarantee the $3 million line of credit. Once the line of credit is retired, and we're certainly aiming for October 1st to have that money be retired, then that collateral comes right back to you.
Okay, that's kind of what I have an understanding of. Thank you very much.
No worries. So back to the allocation of the surplus. Again, for the first 2 years, we're looking at a large portion of that to be going into reserves. Then the rest will be split between local programs that we can fund, as well as cash rebates that we can give back to the customers. The third year, everything going according to plan, which I can guarantee you it won't. It may be better, it may be worse. The third year, we are hopeful that the only $16 million that will be sufficient to tap up the reserves that we need. Then we can take the rest of the money and split it between cash rebates and local programs. All right, so what's next on the horizon? A lot of community outreach. We want to make sure that people understand what we are doing, why we're doing it, and keep repeating that over and over. Believe it or not, an average customer of electricity spends about 10 minutes of their year thinking about electricity, thinking about anything that has to do with our business. That's 10 years that we want to make sure that we fill at least 9 minutes of, to make sure that they understand what we do, because there are plenty of information and misinformation that gets passed around, and it confuses people, and it makes them think that we are in a different business that we are in. Yes.
Okay. I have a question from Supervisor Medina.
Yeah, sure.
The community outreach, that's probably the most important part. You know, I understand the program, I understand the process, because I sit here and I listen to you and I listen to or read all the information I'm provided. But if I was an average resident, I would have no idea what was going on. How can we ensure that we do this community outreach, and how can we get the word out there about this?
Yeah, we have the first 6 people that were hired on the staff were all communication and program coordinators and program managers, in addition to a finance person and a board clerk. They are out every chance they get, connecting with your staff, connecting with the media in your neighborhood, trying to putting brochures together, doing everything possible, participating in events, everything that we can do in order to reach the customer and to kind of tell our story. We will be doing that. Obviously, we were a little busy in the first few months, but now community outreach is going to be more prominent in the work that we do.
Thank you.
Long-term power supplies, I'm in the middle of negotiating 3 different long-term agreements. They will probably collectively add up to somewhere around $25 to $30 million annually that we're going to be spending, and will altogether will amount to less than 20% of the energy that we need for to meet our demand. Since energy acquisition is the most important thing that we do, having an energy risk oversight committee is very important, and I'm in the process of forming one right now. There's a discussion about creating a community advisory council. We're going to be taking a proposal to the board, the policy board tomorrow, about how we go about forming that community advisory council. And finally, one of the most important things that we can turn our attention to now is local supply and energy program options. I know, and I've heard it from a number of you, as well as a whole bunch of customers, that seems to be frustrated lately because they would like to expand or start economic development, and they are not able to do that because they are set back by the amount of time that they have to wait in order to have PG&E extend the service to them. And I've heard it enough now to the point where we're going to do something about it. We're going to start, hopefully, by trying to work collectively to expedite and bring in some experts to see if we can bring PG&E to the table a little sooner and have them connect a little faster. To the extent that we can do that, then maybe we have the option of building something that will be off the grid altogether to get somebody started with their economic development, and later on eventually connect with the grid when the time comes. That work is going to start now that we have a little more time. And with that, happy to answer any more questions.
Okay. Any questions from the Board of Supervisors de la Cruz?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank the board for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this group last year. It was an exciting time last year. It was very educational, very rewarding. I appreciated all the time that all these meetings with race assistance. It came together among all the other counties, and finally we're together here today. And then with your leadership, appointing Jerry Munzers to that group this year is just going to the next step. And I just want to say, commend you, commend Supervisor Munzers and the rest of the staff and the entire group for pushing this issue forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor de la Cruz. Any other questions or comments from the board? If not, I'll open it up for public comment. Do we have any speaker cards? One's coming.
Morning, Board. Seth Capron from Aromas. I'm not your average electrical customer. I spend more than 10 minutes a year thinking about electricity. I've been involved in getting Monterey Bay Community Power started, and I've been going to the board meetings. And I'm up here to add my accolades. Tom has been doing this for a long time. He makes it sound easy, and it's really been a Herculean effort, largely on his part, to get this operation up and running in about 6 months. When you think about starting a business and getting a place to work and hiring people, I mean, that in itself would take most people 6 months, but they've hit the ground running. They've got all of their commercial accounts enrolled, and at this point, only 1% have opted out, which is terrific. He's hired terrific people to run the organization, and we're just really excited about the potential for this to have a really significant impact on their carbon footprint across the whole Central Coast, and also the economic development possibilities. So thanks, Tom, for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none. Any other remarks? I want to thank Mr. Hibachi for taking time to come to the meeting, our meeting this morning, and giving us an update, and kind of look forward for further updates. And as time goes by, and seeing the progress, the ups and downs, because like you said, here's the plan, but sometimes you might have to deviate off of it. It might be better than what we anticipate, and maybe things will be a little slower. We don't know. But we certainly look forward to a long future being involved with our other partners in this endeavor.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add one more item, too. I know that there's been conversations with Mr. Hibachi concerning the outreach, and I know that the first piece of that outreach was a go live in Monterey, the city of Monterey, and I think some of the individuals within the board have expressed, going to their local jurisdictions for some of this outreach. So I would welcome Tom to come to our county, to Hollister area, or to San Juan or somewhere for that outreach, and we would be willing to work with you to set up a place and location. I just want to make sure the board, as well as Tom, was aware of that.
Yeah, and we are planning, by the way, on at least holding one event here very soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to item 11. County Council,
Yes.
let's bring this one.
Okay.
I guess Mr. Valdez will bring it.
Actually, I was just going to close this, but if you would like for me to, I'd be happy to do that. Didn't mean to.
Somebody will.
Okay, so the Regional Conservation Investment Strategy was released, I believe, at the end of January, and it's open for public comment until March 22nd. We have a representative from the Santa Clara Open Space Authority to present. They were acting kind of assisting in preparing it, and they have a PowerPoint to present to the board on that today.
Good morning, Chairman Botello, County Supervisors.
Morning.
Good morning. My name is Andrea McKenzie. I'm the General Manager of the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. We're an open space agency and public special district that was formed 25 years ago to protect open space and agricultural lands in Santa Clara County, about 1,000 square mile jurisdiction. I want to thank County Council and the board for the invitation to come here today to address the Board of Supervisors and provide you an overview with the draft Regional Conservation Investment Strategy, which covers Santa Clara County and a portion of northern San Benito County. So just as overview, the authority, Open Space Authority, is the local sponsor preparing a regional conservation investment strategy for Santa Clara County and northern San Benito County. And the purpose of the RCIS, and I'll be using that as the acronym from here on out, the purpose is threefold: to promote landscape scale conservation of rare species and sensitive habitats within a study area, to facilitate advanced mitigation for public infrastructure projects, and to guide public and private investment for mitigation in areas that can most effectively achieve conservation goals. A little bit about what an RCIS is and what it isn't. There are a number of regional conservation investment strategies that are being piloted across California, and each one is a little bit different, although they all comply with the law. So I just want to frame a little bit about what it is and what it isn't. So on September 22nd, 2016, Governor Brown signed AB 2087, and this created the Regional Conservation Investment Strategy Pilot Program, and it went into effect on January 1st of 2017. So what is an RCIS? It's a voluntary, non-regulatory assessment of conservation areas and priorities, and it's a tool intended to achieve higher quality conservation outcomes in California for species. And this means protecting, restoring, and enhancing habitat and species, and also contributing to their adaptation to climate change and resiliency. An RCIS is essentially a framework. It's an assessment that includes biological goals and objectives, and it describes actions that could be taken within a study area to achieve those goals and objectives. Public agencies and developers can use an approved RCIS as a tool to guide investment in protecting, restoring, and enhancing habitat in advance of impacts from those developments by securing what are called mitigation credits. Okay, what an RCIS is not. An RCIS, as I said, is a framework. It's a voluntary framework. It is not regulatory. It does not issue a permit, and it cannot regulate land use or affect existing land use authorities of public agencies or regulatory requirements or standards of those local government agencies, including city and county general plans. So why would a public entity want to create a regional conservation investment strategy and be a local sponsor of one? Why would the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority see value in creating an RCIS? There is only so far any one entity can go to achieve its regional goals, in this case protecting open space, agricultural lands, with the resources and the finances that we have. So by using this tool, we can effectuate more effective landscape scale benefits. We can work with local governments and developers to expedite public infrastructure projects So in essence, we get more effective conservation, and we get more effective mitigation, and we expedite public infrastructure projects. The main reason that we decided to get involved was around about 2015. We were having discussions with our own regional transportation agency, in this case the Valley Transportation Authority, which was poised to put a $6.3 billion transportation measure on the ballot in 2016. And the projects in that transportation measure would eventually have to mitigate their impacts and build those mitigation costs into the project delivery. If we could work with the Transportation Authority to direct the mitigation and the dollars for those mitigation into more meaningful conservation projects, everybody would win. And so we joined with a number of partners and consultants to prepare and to step up and say, okay, we'll be a local sponsor of a regional conservation investment strategy for this region. Let me tell you a little bit about the study area. This map shows, the black outline shows the boundary of the RCIS, and within it there's a red crosshatched area, which is the border of an existing habitat conservation plan and natural community conservation plan, otherwise known as the Valley Habitat Plan. That is a regulatory area. It issues a permit to developers in exchange for in lieu fees they pay. It does not cover all of Santa Clara County, and it does not cover all actions that occur. So, for instance, transportation projects by any of those northern Santa Clara cities, for instance, would not be covered by that existing crosshatched area, the Habitat Conservation Plan. So we teamed up with the Valley Habitat Agency and this Regional Conservation Investment Strategy to introduce a new tool that could help project delivery of transportation and water infrastructure projects while generating a source of funding for conservation. The RCIS includes biological goals and objectives for 18 animal species and 11 plant species, which includes connectivity for wildlife moving across the landscape, wildlife corridors. The RCIS includes all of Santa Clara County and portions of northern San Benito County, which includes 3 watersheds that affect the upper Pajaro River floodplain. And the reason why we included this portion of San Benito in our study area was to be able to streamline conservation investment and mitigation for infrastructure projects along that Santa Clara-San Benito border, which obviously, as you can see there in the slide, includes the Pajaro River, the greater Pajaro River floodplain. And the kinds of projects that it could help streamline include VTA's Highway 101 widening project and the State Route 152 trade corridor project. I might also just mention that while Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority's jurisdiction is Santa Clara County, we can hold conservation lands in willing partnerships with other public entities and private entities, but we cannot spend money outside of Santa Clara County. So we can hold land in northern San Benito County were it to be important to San Benito County or developers if they needed a partner to do so. But we're very interested in the future of the Pajaro River floodplain and working with our partners, including local government here, on that.
While we were on that slide there, Ms. McKenzie.
Yes, sir.
We had an opportunity, Supervisor Munzer and I, have a little briefing with you prior to this presentation, and one of the questions and concerns I had was, if you could go back to that last slide, how this line, especially on the west side, was drawn up. It doesn't even take in the San Benito River, and I kind of thought that that line should have probably extended over to our county line to the west, at the bare minimum. Is there any other, I think you tried to explain it, but is there a little bit more logic to that that maybe could help me with that?
There were three things really that informed the lines of our study area. And I do want to emphasize it's not a designation, it's a study area, a general area within which we think there could be both better protection, better conservation work done, and there are pending transportation infrastructure projects happening. So that's one thing. The 18 animal and 11 plant species that occur within our study area, a number of them are in that particular study area. And we were also looking at a specific boundary of watersheds. These are called HUC 10 watersheds that affect the Pajaro River. There's a very good argument that could be made, and we appreciate the suggestion that that line could have been easily drawn to incorporate areas to the west. To the extent that there are other regional conservation investment strategies done in the future, or this particular RCIS is amended, those areas could be included. So that's my best answer.
Didn't want to put you on too hard
Yeah.
on the spot. I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
I did want to mention one other thing, and like the Community Choice Energy program you just heard about, you have to talk about it very slowly. It can be kind of a complicated topic to discuss. But again, I mentioned that a regional conservation investment strategy is a framework. It is non-regulatory. It provides an opportunity for public agencies and developers to do mitigation and therefore streamline their projects to move forward. An RCIS on its own cannot achieve that without the instrument, and the instrument is called a mitigation credit agreement. Any public agency, any private developer, any private entity can pursue a mitigation credit agreement once an RCIS is approved by the state of California. So the mitigation credit agreement is essentially like a mitigation bank. It defines an area where mitigation can occur, and those credits can be banked, they can be sold, they can be transferred, they can be an economic development mechanism for a landowner, for a developer, for a public agency. So I'll give you an example. In Santa Clara County, and one of the reasons we got involved in this is we are very interested in a landscape called the Coyote Valley. If we could create a mitigation credit agreement in portions of the Coyote Valley, if water agencies or transportation agencies needed credit for certain types of mitigation, they could pay into that credit system, and then they could move on with their project. Again, public agencies or developers voluntarily use this instrument called an MCA. The guidelines for the MCA is still being developed as we speak by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So to the extent the supervisors or others, and I know this concern was brought up about mitigation in San Benito County, there's an argument to be made there that preferentially a county may wish that mitigation done in their county is for impacts created in their county. And that could be something that is built into the mitigation credit agreement instrument. As County Council mentioned, there's a, excuse me.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Does that happen now? Why the RCS IS is being developed specifically for this project, or is it in the future?
Mr. Chairman, it'll be in the future. So the RCIS creates the framework, and then in the future, once the guidelines for MCAs are developed, then a public agency or developer could choose to pursue a mitigation credit agreement.
Supervisor Medina.
Well, with that being said, if we were in the RCIS and we went ahead and had that only projects in San Benito County would qualify for those mitigation credits. Someone from out of county can still have mitigation credits in San Benito County, but not through RCIS. Is that correct?
As of right now, if the California Department of Fish and Wildlife approves an RCIS for the study area as I've shown you, then any public entity or developer could start a mitigation credit agreement, assuming the state has approved those guidelines, and they could mitigate within that study area.
But not what I'm referring to is we were speaking of just joining a group stating that the only development can be done in San Benito County. But someone from out of San Benito County could opt not to use your group, our group, and do it themselves through another agency. Is that correct?
If I understand you correctly through the chair, once the RCIS is adopted, and the San Benito County Board of Supervisors, for instance, could write a letter before it's adopted and say that preferentially they would like mitigation that happens in San Benito County to be generated by projects in San Benito County. And that would be up to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to bake that into the regional conservation investment strategy. One thing that's very clear, Supervisor, is that in the AB 2087 that the governor signed, they were very clear to state that the RCIS itself cannot affect land use. So setting mitigation requirements belongs with the local government when they evaluate projects. So whether or not, and this is a question really to be raised with them if you choose to submit a comment letter, can it be baked into the RCIS, that kind of a requirement, or is it preferentially you would like to see that any future projects, mitigation projects done in San Benito County through a mitigation credit agreement state that there would be consultation with San Benito County?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. I guess you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just really in wrapping up, there's a 60-day public review for this draft regional conservation investment strategy. The comment period closes on March 22nd. Any letters the county may wish to submit should be directed to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We'd appreciate it if you'd copy the Open Space Authority as the local sponsor. And then, as I said, once CDFW approves the RCIS, their next step will be adopting guidelines so that local government and developers can actually use this as a tool. And I think there's another bite at the apple in the development of those guidelines, which is happening right now, to state your preference for mitigation happening in county for impacts generated in county.
Thank you.
I'm happy to answer any additional questions the supervisors may
on
have.
the board at this time, Supervisor Munzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank you for coming and speaking before us and also meeting with Supervisor Patello and myself. I did contact AMBAG staff because AMBAG was considering doing an RCIS, and they indicated because there were no large transportation projects within the region that they have decided not to pursue this at this time. But having talked with them, and this kind of goes along with what was being said earlier, I feel we need to direct staff to bring back at our March 20th meeting a comment letter that we can approve, and in that comment letter would address the idea that any mitigation lands would be purchased in close proximity to the project. I'm a little bit of concern about excluding any and all out-of-county projects being able to utilize mitigation land in San Benito County, because the overpass that hopefully will come about in the next few years at 25 and 101 may need to mitigation land here. We don't want to set it up to where they can't do it. So I'm not sure what the wording would be, but either something along the line that it would be close proximity to the project, or that we have input into when mitigation land can be used in this county. I think it would be very important in that comment letter. And also the idea that if some land was chosen by an out-of-county project, then we would be made whole to any loss revenue and property tax, something along that line also. So those are my comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Medina, do you have anything?
Just real quick, when I first read this, Regional Conservation Investment Strategy, it was a little bit confusing, so I spent some time, read the whole pamphlet, also met and listened for about an hour. When I first thought of it, it was more government intervention, more red tax. So it's going to take a lot longer to do anything than it did in the past. Well, I was surprised to hear it's the opposite. Mitigation will not go away, as I was told. It's going to be here forever. This certain program doesn't increase any mitigation acres or what have you. This, in turn, will speed up the process because the mitigation land's already been set aside. You know what you need to do. So you're using this as an avenue to speed things up rather than slow things down. The only question I had, and I'm still doing some research, and I'll meet with staff again probably next week, is dealing with the fish and wildlife. That's the one that we'll probably have to discuss and go further in that. But other than that, it was much different after I read it and someone sat down with me and kind of explained what I read a little bit clearer. And I thank you for your time. It's to me right now, until I do some more research, it's a great program, but there's still a lot of questions that I have. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Very good. Any other comments or questions from the board? If not, I'm going to open it up to public comment. I see one coming up. Mr. Richmond.
Hi, good morning again. Marty Richmond. Supervisor Medina took the words right out of my mouth. You're really going to deal with fish and wildlife again? Didn't you just deal with fish and wildlife? How'd that work out for you? You're going to give them the option to decide whether or not they should let some outside county buy your mitigation? You're going to feed that dragon and then you're going to try and put a dog collar on it? How's that worked out in the past for us? I'm just asking you. I mean, don't you learn anything? That's crazy. This is crazy. I tell you what, if Santa Clara County would give us, let's say, 15% of their business revenue, I'd be happy to let them mitigate the hell out of San Benito County. But they won't do it. What they want to do is do what they did at Panocha Valley, which is capture all the land in San Benito County and use it as a place to go visit. No, I don't blame them for wanting to mitigate Coyote Valley. That's theirs. They can do whatever they want with it. And they don't need to worry about it because they got money coming out of their nose. Here's what you need is you need veto power. You don't need preferential treatment. You need veto power. You need to be able to decide, as representatives of San Benito County, this board, whether or not you're willing to accept a mitigation proposal. And that way you can say yes for the overpass at 101, and you can say no for the guy who wants to buy it and use it to mitigate some project in Santa Clara County. And that's the only way you should agree to that. And if Fish and Wildlife is involved, it'll never cost less. It'll always cost more because it'll be years more. They don't make decisions in less than years. How long did it take them to make the decision at Panocha Valley? Just every little decision took forever, and all we ever had was the builder in here saying, I'm trying to do something, but Fish and Wildlife has had our proposal for months or forever. The truth of the matter is, California Fish and Wildlife has an agenda. They're in bed with the environmental groups, and when they don't want something done in San Benito County, they're going to cut it off if they have the power to do so. We just saw that. And what in the world would make them change if they have that power? The answer is nothing. So you should reject this wholeheartedly and say the only way we'd sign up is if we have veto power, total veto power on this. Right now, we're buying our mitigation in the middle of nowhere for land we're never going to use over by Four Corners because that's where the college bought some land that they can't use. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? If not, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion and direction to staff. I think we have some direction to bring back a letter with some of the suggestions that Supervisor Munzer has, unless there's any other comments that we shouldn't be taking that approach. I think the comments from Supervisor Munzer was very valid, and I think Mr. Richmond had some very valid comments. I don't know if we could get away completely without participating in this RCIS, but I truly do believe that we should have some sort of input as far as the mitigations that are being proposed, and and the impacts that it would have on our long-term land use planning. So I think staff, you have adequate information and direction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, you mind if we take some time? I got to go to the other room and thaw out.
Yeah, in fact, you're reading my mind. I don't like breaks, but we'll take one right here for about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah, you got it working now. No. Actually, it dropped 1 degree.
Got to go down to go up.
So did you take it off air AC and put it on heat?
Oh.
It's non-cold.
Sort of. I tell you, it's cheaper to run the AC in the winter and the heater in the summer. Very cost efficient.
That's what they do in Arizona.
Okay. All right. We want to call this meeting back to order. If we could kind of find our seats. We'll move on to item 12. CEO Espinoza, you want to introduce that item for us?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The last probably 2 or 3 meetings now, we've had a discussion concerning sales tax, cannabis, business tax, so on and so forth. Here we are today, per your direction, this particular item, number 12, cannabis. So I have Louis Valdez, our management analyst, will be discussing both these items, item number 12 and 13, with your board moving forward. So, Louis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The Office of County Counsel, at your request from the subsequent board meeting that was held and that discussion, has prepared a resolution for your consideration that would call an election and provide the opportunity for the establishment of a tax on cannabis business activities and consolidating that election scheduled for the general election, which is a statewide election to be held on June 5th. So at this time, I'm going to ask Barbara Thompson, County Counsel, to elaborate on that resolution and the options that you have in front of you to proceed or not with that action. Barbara?
Okay. And let me, if I could start with kind of explaining some new developments at the state level, and then I'll go actually into the ordinance and the resolution because there's been some changes since the board packet was prepared. There is a new initiative pending at the state level, and it's posted on the Secretary of State's website as reaching the 25% threshold. And we did some investigation on what does that mean that it's been listed as meeting the 25% threshold. And so the 25% threshold was added in 2014 pursuant to Senate Bill 1253 and ultimately derives from the recommendation made by the California Commission on Campaign Financing in 1992, which noted that the 25% hearing threshold is selected to separate serious initiative proposals from frivolous efforts. The Commission analyzed available data for signature collection drives from 1982 to 1990. The data indicated if collected, showed that the bulk of all initiatives which gathered at least 25% of the requisite signatures qualified for the ballot at the end of their signature drives. Professional signature gathering firms advised the Commission that the conclusion agrees with their experience. And then I spoke with somebody that has some experience with this, indicating that because the 25% threshold, although they still need to get more signatures, it separates those that have probably engaged in paid signature gatherers, and there's a substantial commitment to gathering those signatures. So the ones that have gotten themselves organized to collect this many signatures, more likely than not, will collect the number of signatures to get the initiative qualified, or at least to present those signatures. Now, they still have to get enough signatures. They still have to qualify those signatures, and occasionally that does not happen. But I guess the issue would be more likely than not, this initiative that's pending at the state level, may get enough signatures to qualify for the November 2018 ballot. And if it does, it is going to be similar to some of the other propositions which have had tax reforms over the last several years, and it would be retroactive to July 1st, 2018, in that if we pass a tax in 2018, it could no longer be collected unless it was approved by 2/3 of the voters, and that's whether it was a general tax or a special tax. So it converts that distinction between general taxes and special taxes to just basically taxes and exempt charges. It also defines what a fee would be through that exempt charge. Currently, Fees are, and it's set forth in the staff report, indicating the fee is to provide a service, to recover the county's cost in performing that service, and it's based upon the reasonable estimate of what it would cost to perform those services. The new definition in the new initiative indicates that the reasonable charge for specific governmental services, which does not exceed actual costs to local government, or the reasonable cost not to exceed actual regulatory costs to local government for issuing the permit. And there's several other exemptions. So the county will have to comply with that when it also does. If this thing passes in November, it's going to make it slightly probably more technical to impose fees as well as taxes in the future, because we'll have to meet a higher standard to impose fees as well as taxes. So that one's an issue that's still pending, and we won't know what happens for that for probably another 2.5 or 3 months.
Okay.
So I passed out changes to the ordinance and resolution. We'll go through the ordinance first. And let me just kind of give you a little bit of overview about what this is. This is a cannabis business activities ordinance to impose a general tax on cannabis businesses. Right now, the voters that would be required to pass that would be a majority. If the new initiative passes, then that would be 2/3. The tax is imposed on cultivators based upon the square footage of canopy area, and it's based upon gross receipts and various other types of activities such as manufacturing, distribution, etc. Now, I note that cannabis business activities are not allowed at the present time. Therefore, no tax would be collected unless an ordinance is passed in the future to allow such activities. So this does not allow any cannabis business activities unless the board takes future action to allow that.
Supervisor Medina?
Just to be clear.
Yes.
The ordinance we're speaking about is for the tax.
Yes.
Not for the actual cultivation
That's
of
correct.
cannabis. I just want to make sure everybody understands that. This is just for the tax, nothing to do with the cultivation or any type of use.
Yes.
Thank you.
And the ordinance is very specific that this does not allow anything that's not already not allowed by our county code. So if it's prohibited under the county code, this is just a mechanism that would allow a tax to be collected if the board should allow such activity in the future. So on the ordinance, it was circulated for internal staff comment, and basically a lot of the changes that were presented is really just minor typos, except that we did do some changes to the cannabis coordinator and the treasurer tax collector, the definitions, to make them a bit broader. So the cannabis coordinator has also, it says, in the event that a cannabis coordinator has not been appointed by the Board of Supervisors, or in the event of unavailability of the cannabis coordinator shall mean the director of Resource Management Agency or his or her designee. And the treasurer tax collector's definition has been modified as well to mean the treasurer tax collector of the County of San Benito, his or her deputies, unless another county officer or employee is assigned by resolution of the Board of Supervisors to perform all or a portion of the duties listed herein, in which case the treasurer tax collector shall be interpreted as the person defined in the resolution. And there's been some internal questions about exactly how these duties that would be defined. Not all, in the end, not all these duties may go to the treasurer tax collector. I have spoken with her, and she had to leave prior to this agenda item. But she indicated that, she thinks that perhaps the tax should be collected similar to other unsecured taxes. But that can be fleshed out in the future, because some of the duties may go to the auditor's office, some may go to the treasurer tax collector's office, et cetera. If this passes, then we'll have to decide where exactly those duties are, and that's allowable pursuant to that amended definition. And then the only other main substantial change is the penalty section.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 10% and 10% previously, and we've increased it to 12.5% for if it's 30-day, if it's late, and then another 12.5% if it's more than 30 days late. So that's under 5.03170. And then Section 4 just changed a little bit because some counties have put out some model language about how to address that initiative that's pending at the state level, and so we copied it there. And then, so those are minor changes to the ordinance. Then I passed out a revised measure. Now, this measure is very important, so I want to make sure that it reflects what the board would like to receive on the ballot. These numbers we want to make sure that they reflect the numbers that the board would like to see. But the change that was specifically mentioned was that we changed it from 2 to 4% on distributors. So I've indicated that it's 0.5 to 4% on distributors. And we also added the word laboratories, and that reflects what's actually in the ordinance. And that just indicates that on cultivators, it's going to be based upon canopy area. And on distributors, laboratories, manufacturers, resellers, micro businesses, it's going to be based upon gross receipts, and the percentage is listed there. So if the board would like to, then there's the resolution that it can pass and present this matter to the voters in June.
Okay. So 5.03.17.0 penalties, fees, and interest, it's still reading 10% in our staff report. It's actually 12.5.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board?
Not at this time.
Supervisor Munzer, then?
Couple things, Barbara, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but on the agenda item, you have an annual CPI increase to account for inflation?
Yes.
That's on a tax?
Yes. Just because if we do it, and it was only based upon the tax, it's based upon the $3 to $17, because that's a set dollar amount. And so let's say that CPA increases over the next 10 years, let's say, whatever, 20%, that $17 maximum would go up by that same CPI. The CPA is not based upon the other percentages because as costs inflate, 3% naturally inflates itself, but the $3 to $17 needed a CPI, otherwise it would be stale over time.
Okay, can you help me and give me an example of what tax has a CPI built into it?
I know our fees do, and also I think our special taxes that we've done for CSAs. When it's based, this is. I guess that's an example. All right. Okay. That is optional. If you want to just cap it at $17, that is, you would come back and if that ever became an inadequate number.
Okay.
Supervisor Medina.
Just before I relinquish the floor, one other comment. The method of taxing cultivation would be a square foot on canopy. Mm-hmm. Do we want to give ourselves flexibility because we don't know what the actual ordinance is going to look like, and maybe say either square foot on canopy or gross receipts?
Yeah. I think that probably why a lot of counties, and Sarah, who worked on this ordinance, she did a great job on this ordinance. She looked at several counties that have adopted this, and I think that probably the tendency why counties are going towards canopy areas, it's more easily verifiable than gross receipts. That you can actually go out to the site and look at the canopy area where the gross receipts may be more of a collection issue. So I suspect that that's why it's been more counties are going with canopy area.
Okay. All right.
Supervisor Medina?
Just to talk about the CPI, right now we're at, I think, the 3% to the 17%. So we can move that any time we want as long as there's a vote of the board and majority wins. But when you're looking at a percent or a fixed amount, that fixed amount, what we're speaking of is it allows us, if inflation, anything else increases, it allows us to go to an extra, at 20%, an extra, what is that, $3.40 without any type of vote or anything else, because we cannot exceed that $17. That's why the CPI is so important right now. On the other stuff, the percentages, it takes in the inflation. So that's why this will be something that can be around for years and decades, and that's why I see the CPI as important.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
CEO.
An additional line of reasoning, as well as you can look at it from the other side of the coin, Supervisor Munzer, is with gas tax, it's been stale for years, and now the roads are decaying even quicker. So there hasn't been any infusion of money over this time or the CPI to be able to address those things. So that's kind of the opposite way of looking at it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? If not, I'll open it up for public comment. Do we have any speaker cards?
Mandisa?
That was perfect. Thank you. Hello, good morning to the board. I'm just going to, I've emailed you each separately a copy of my comments and then a proposal that I would like you, Mr. Chair, to consider action on today. So I would like to formally request that you create a cannabis advisory group that can be overseen and directed by the board that will support the either the cannabis coordinator and or the director of the resource management agency attaches a proposal for purposes and function of CAG process in our county. The county has about 25 or so heritage farmers who deserve to be engaged in a regulated market. They would also they've already shown a willingness to contribute to the needs of the county. So I'm asking that you please reach out to them and invite them to a seat at the table, assist in developing a potential ordinance and educating you on their needs to have a successful business. Creating this CAG process would be an act of government transparency. It would be an action of support to the farmers who trusted your amortization process and promises. The farmers who will be your community allies in this new industry if you choose to adopt an ordinance. Also, voters for your tax measure and also taxpayers of the tax that you're proposing. So please allow us to work with you, to allow us to support your process, to provide resources which would bring us all success in any cannabis endeavors in San Benito County. It only works if we work together, and we call ourselves a cannabis community because in business that's what we do, we work together. And now I think it's time for that community to work together with local government. I would also like to state that I'm hosting an event in San Juan Bautista at the end of the month, and Mr. Chair, I formally invite you to come and participate in that. It's an informal meeting and a mixer to engage in conversation, to address the needs and challenges of community members, discuss the changes happening at the state level. I also invite you to share this information with the list of amortized heritage farmers who applied for your process. Invite them and engage with them as their neighbor and elected official to try and move forward together as a unified community. And so I have reviewed briefly this ordinance, and I've also included a memo from the Regional Council of the Cow Growers pertaining to taxes that has been collected from counties all over the state. So I invite you all to review that. And if you have any questions, I am open to be a support of you in any way that I can. I am still an advocate, and I'm doing this all volunteering out of the kindness of my heart, and because I'm really committed to trying to see us make sound policy decisions together and engage the community in that process. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Marty Richmond?
Good morning again. The only comment I have is just a question for staff and a comment about why I'm asking a question. When you have either a range of taxes proposed or an individual or a specific number, is that essentially coordinated with the tax rates that the city of Hollister has in effect or is considering, or when there's a range, is there an overlap so they could match? The one thing I don't want the city of Hollister and the county of San Benito to get into is a race to the bottom on the tax rate, because both or either want to capture the business. I think as far as this county goes, the city is in the county. I would prefer to see the tax rates essentially the same. for the same operation, whether it's distribution or growing or whatever. If it's a different operation, obviously the tax rates would be different. I would hope they would be the same so that somebody doesn't decide to move their operation a quarter mile down the road so they can be in another jurisdiction and get a lower tax number, forcing the original jurisdiction to lower their taxes, and eventually we're all sitting at zero going, what happened here? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll defer the reaction to, or the response to the question after public comment. And I'll come right back to you, Supervisor Medina. Anybody else from the public? Mr. Gomez?
Yeah, Honorable Chair, members of the board, Victor Gomez with Pinnacle Strategy. First of all, I want to commend staff for their work on this. Actually, I think the language on there is very well written, very well put, and also to Marty's point, there is a slight competitive advantage, I think, for the county. So you guys, your rates, if you would hit the bottom, would be slightly below the city of Hollister, but still very competitive. But again, this body would have to come back to, if the tax passes, this body would have to come back and set that rate on where you're going to land anyway. So if you keep it where the city of Hollister is, it keeps you very competitive, which is actually kind of nice, I think, for you folks. It does give you quite a bit of an edge. And to Supervisor Munzer's point, I'm glad he brought up that question as well. And to that point, Supervisor Munzer, it is pretty consistent that cultivations are taxed on a square footage rate. It's for a cannabis cultivator, they know what they're going to pay on an annual basis. And it does help them with their profit and loss statements and figuring out what their expenses are going to be. But also for you folks, for the legislative body and for staff, they'll have a better idea of what their revenues are going to be, and their revenues are going to be very, very consistent when it comes to cultivation, right? I know right now you're considering a cultivation ordinance, and if this tax passes and that ordinance passes as well, you folks will have very, very consistent revenues, tax revenues from cultivation. Manufacturing and retail, I know you guys haven't discussed that. You did last year indicate your desire to pursue maybe manufacturing in the future. Those are a little bit less consistent, a little bit more volatile, because it really depends on gross receipts and how those businesses are being operated. But the good thing, again, is that you're pursuing cultivation, and on the cultivation side, you'll be the business owner will have consistent expenses, and the legislative body will have consistent revenues. So it could certainly be a win-win for everybody. So again, thank you so much for your leadership. We hope that you do place this on the June ballot and let the voters decide. And thank you to staff as well for their leadership on this.
Thank you. Anybody else? Not, I'll close the public comment and bring it back to Supervisor Medina. Did you have a comment before I recognize our staff?
Yes, let me just answer that for Marty. I know, as to the best of my knowledge, the city has development agreements. They don't have a true tax. So with that being said, that is why you're looking at a sliding scale from $3 to $17. So what it allows us to do at any point in time, increase or decrease those dollars with the vote of the 5 up here. If we just had a fixed, if it was $3, that's it, and we went to the voters for that, every time we wanted to increase or decrease, we'd have to go to the voters. So this is why the mechanism works a little bit better in this scenario.
Okay, is there anything that staff want to add to that explanation? Okay, that's good. Any comments or concerns or questions from the board?
I'll give my last comment. As everybody knows, Prop 64 was voted on in 2016, and just by looking at the numbers here, it passed in the state of California 57.13% to 42.87%. Now, with that being said, I've really analyzed and read a lot of different arguments of Proposition 64, but when you really look at everything Proposition 64 stated, A lot of it was just to legalize marijuana under state law. It imposes a state tax. It exempts medical marijuana from some taxation. It doesn't really talk about the cultivation. I mean, I know it's in there, but it's in there real deep where now you can have cultivation. So I understand our residents, roughly 55, 56% here in Hollister or San Benito County, wanted to have the Prop 64. So what I did is I want this on the ballot for one reason, because you're looking at this saying it's taxation. They know it. People that are voting are clear that this is for cultivation purposes. So it's black or white. There's no gray area hidden into any type of ballot measure. So with that being said, I look at what we're talking about today. You know, I do want this on the June ballot. Then we can proceed with the ordinance, and then we will have buy-in from the residents, not just 5 of our board members deciding on an ordinance of the actual cultivation process. So we will have to do that, but it will actually align with the residents saying they want cultivation because the majority has spoken, whether it's yay or nay.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from board members? If not, I'll have a comment myself. I know, Prop 64 passed in our county. We are working on an ordinance in RMA right now, and that we'll hear more about that at future meetings. But it's very important for us to establish revenue streams to provide services, and that's one of the things that cannabis is not going to solve our problems by itself. It's just one revenue stream, one bucket, and we need lots of buckets. And, with support for this tax, it will send a message to continue to move forward with an ordinance, in my mind. I, certainly prefer the tax over development agreements. I think development agreements are fine for revenue streams to, a jurisdiction if you don't have a whole lot of them. And potentially, as one of the speakers noted, there was, 25 growers that complied with our allocation process earlier last year, and that's quite a few different types of operations, and I don't see it being feasible to have a development agreement for each of them because each of them are unique, and that will be the case going forward in the future. I find this being a whole lot more fair to everybody. Everybody's taxed the same, and whether you're a big operation, you can get taxed more. A small operation can get taxed less. But I think staff has done an outstanding job, well beyond my expectations, bringing this forward. And I certainly support this resolution and placing it on the ballot. Any other comments from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adopt resolution calling an election to submit to the voters an ordinance imposing tax on cannabis business activities and consolidating said election with the regularly scheduled general election to California statewide election to be held on June 5th, 2018.
And to clarify, that includes the changes that were passed out to the resolution, the ordinance today.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 13. Mr. Valdez.
Yes, sir. Once again, Mr. Chairman, the board asked that staff bring back a measure to implement one of several types of revenue-generating taxes, including the transaction and use tax, a business license tax, which includes the extraction fee. One thing I wanted to clarify, that ordinance includes extraction language within the actual text of the ordinance, so they're not two separate measures, or it's all included in the same measure, and the transportation occupancy tax, as well as the vehicle tax. which would help the abandoned vehicle tax abatement fee to be implemented. As the board is aware, that item had been previously discussed. The board deferred and indicated that it would be more appropriate to bring it back at a future date, and that item is now included in this particular discussion for your consideration and for your direction or decision at this point in time.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? Any comments from staff? No? All right. I'll open it up for public comment.
Mr. Chair, did you want me to elaborate on the differences between a business license fee and a business license tax
I think
anymore?
that would be a good idea, if you don't mind, Mr. Richmond, if we have that elaboration.
Okay. Elaborate. Yeah, as mentioned previously, the fee is to recover county costs to provide a service or product or to do regulation on an industry, and the fee is to collect or recover the reasonable cost of providing that service. So a business license tax it would be a revenue. A business license tax previously was it's a general revenue measure that the county would adopt to raise money for either a specific purpose, which would be a special tax, or for a general purpose. So if you had a business license tax, it could be for the county's general fund to be used for any purpose, or you could have it as a special tax measure to provide revenue for tourism or economic development, et cetera, something that might, benefit the businesses that were subject to the tax. Is that adequate explanation of that?
Yeah, that's good. I like that. And, just for my own train of thought, too, a business license tax, we're basically not identifying a certain percentage or revenue that will go to specific needs. For instance, if we did the TOT increase, we are calling it a transit occupancy tax. Mm-hmm. Some discussion prior meetings, we've thought that would be the economic development revenue that we could promote the chamber or the wine trail or what have you, that would hopefully bring more visitors and more tax to our county. Are we still contemplating having the depletion tax or extraction tax in this business license tax or fee?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I read through the old fee or through the previously repealed ordinances. The extraction language is included within the language of the ordinance, so that would be within the language of the text of the ordinance. Yes, sir. Okay. So it's not a separate issue.
All right. And there's no concern about it being kind of the legalities of
no, we
that?
looked into that they could be combined in the same ordinance.
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't think that was the issue before. I think the issue was that there were other factors involved that did not involve legal issues.
I did raise that at the last meeting, and we did look into that it was permissible to have that as part of the an ordinance for the business license.
Correct.
So if the board is interested, we have, we could bring forth ordinances that would be either for the transaction and use tax or for the business license tax, either for the June or the November election, whichever the board would prefer.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions from the board? If not, I'll entertain Mr. Richmond in public comment.
Thank you. I want to make sure that if we do any combined taxes, we get the language such that if this item fails, if there's currently a tax in place, it does not go away. I think we talked about how that happened by accident 20 years ago or something. I can't remember specifically which ones. Remember, we had a tax and a new proposal rolled together, and then when the new proposal didn't make it, the old one went away. I can't remember. Remember, we talked about that during the retreat. I want to make sure we don't do the same thing all over again. We put the extraction tax or any other tax in there in such a way, language-wise, that if you put it on the ballot and it doesn't make it, all of a sudden the tax we've been getting all along rides down the hill with it. I think that's really important. So that's the only input I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Good morning, members of the board. Mark Wyrick from SEIU 521. Just want to state that our members are, in support of any measure that will give the county the means to provide and expand quality services. And we'd like to see the county be successful in passing any measures that it places before the voters. And I'd like to suggest that before the board fully commits to moving forward with placing either a sales tax or a transportation tax measure on the ballot, that the board commission some polling on voter support first to determine the likelihood of success for either of those measures. And that further, following such polling, that the measure be considered for the November ballot instead of June, so there's enough time to properly educate voters on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there was a question earlier about the manner in which the initiative, or I should say the referendum, repealed the previous tax. The manner in which it was written, and I think this was an opinion that County Council at the time gave, was the question posed to the voters was, well, shall the entire measure be repealed, or shall this tax be repealed in whole? Not just in part for that. And that's something that came about after the voters spoke. The analysis from County Council was that, well, it was a question that basically said that, or asked the voters to repeal the whole thing because the whole thing is not what we want. And they said yes, that was the opinion. This will not provide that. That's number one. And number two, in terms of polling, I think that's a question for the board to answer, but I think it's your call.
Public comment before that, I forgot to.
I'm sorry.
Any other persons from the public? If not, I'm closing public comment. County Council.
Okay, and just so the board is aware, we have language for a transaction use tax measure that we could present to the board for the June election, and it's here as well for a November election if you wanted to wait until November. But we have that. And we also have a draft language for a business license tax. And we've also, because we previously did the tax measures, we have a TOT measure from 2014 that would be easy to bring back for the board if the board wanted to do a TOT tax, as well as the abandoned vehicle fee. So I think that is all the different types of taxes that the board is considering right now. So it's up to the board. If you wanted to see these if you were trying to go for the June election, what we would do is pass these measures out and ask that the board, you could either adopt them today, you could adjourn the regular meeting to a different day and study them and come back as long as it's before June 9th. March 9th, so that we can get this adopted. Or if at the November election, we would set it for a separate meeting and do a more in-depth analysis or study session on these proposals if you were headed for the November election.
Okay. Supervisor De La Cruz?
No, Mark from SAU mentioned about it doing a poll. COG is doing a poll. What do you think of the idea of adding a couple more questions to that group?
I think it sure wouldn't hurt. I think we should if we can.
Right.
Supervisor Medina?
With all due respect, Mark, I agree with you on the sales tax and the road tax. No doubt in my mind that we need a poll. When it comes down to the transportation or the TOT tax, along with the extraction or the abandoned vehicle, I don't see the poll. So I don't know if you would agree with that or not. But what I'm more concerned about is the TOT tax, the extraction business license, and the vehicle tax. Those are the ones that I feel we can put on the June election, and then starting tomorrow, we can educate our residents. One of the things that I'm looking at now is if we do look at the TOT tax with some help with some people that I was talking to recently, is hold a meeting with all the entities, all the people that own or are involved in the hotels, bring them together and educate them. Educate them not only on why we need this tax, but what the surrounding communities are charging, because they're charging a lot more than we are. So even the playing field would be a pretty substantial increase. And then what do they get out of it? Is there a certain thing we can do to help them out also with some type of tourism, promoting tourism, which will increase their vacancy? So that's what I'm thinking of. And once again, I do respect your comment. And when it comes to the sales of the road, I would not even want them in the June. That's my wish. But thank you.
Supervisor Munzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Mark for coming and speaking and giving us his comment. I see that not only SAIU, but all of our bargaining units as being very important and instrumental, and need to be at the table as we craft these different taxes. Because as we found a couple years ago, these things cannot be put out there without an in-depth education to the public. And we put them out 2 years ago, and they failed. And I think if we try to do it here, anything other than the cannabis one for June, we are setting ourselves up for failure again. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Myself, if I could add on, I think the business license tax, definitely probably should wait till November. But something like TOT, there's not that many hotels out here. It's not a tax that generally, many of our citizens will be affected by. When they go out of town and stay in a hotel, they're staying at hotels that are charging 12%, 13% tax. I know I don't go anywhere that is less than that. And so, I kind of like to see us have at least two taxes or proposals to the voters in June myself, and then continue to work and educate and refine the business license tax and extraction tax and general tax if we're going that direction. And I think the polling idea, maybe partnering with COG, is a real good idea because they already got the wheels in motion. We just add a few more questions. I think people need to be questioned about their understanding of the level of service and what we're able to provide because of the lack of revenues in our county, and see if we could make a decision whether we do a transportation tax or a general sales tax, and just live with it. Any other thoughts? There has to be. Supervisor Medina.
I'd make a motion if there's no other thoughts. Okay, make a motion to have staff put together a ballot measure in separate forms, one for the TOT tax and one for the vehicle tax, and bring the other taxes we're speaking of back at a later date to discuss, and possibly put those on the November ballot.
November or June?
No, for the TOT tax and the vehicle tax would be June.
Okay.
The other taxes we spoke of would be brought back to our board at a later time and possibly put on in November of 2018.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I guess I'll question the motion then under the question.
Yeah, so you second it, and under a question, go ahead, Supervisor De La Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Supervisor Medina, the COG is doing a poll to see if it's their support for the transportation road. I would highly recommend the board, once that poll comes out, take that into consideration and see where it stands in terms of any other taxes.
Yes, I will accept that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any other
Statistically, the board-
questions under, any other comments or dialogue under the second? Seeing none, before I turn to a vote, I'll recognize the county council.
I'll wait and see whether it gets the requisite vote, but if you did want to move forward with June, it would mean holding this, adjourning this meeting to a later date in the remainder of the week, so we can bring back those measures for you to vote on it by Friday.
I'm sorry, so.
We need to approve the resolution by Friday, so you would have to adjourn this meeting to, let's say, Thursday or Friday, so that we could approve those measures if it got the 4 votes from the board to proceed forward with it in June.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Because you have a resolution in front of you that she'd have to modify for you to adopt to place it on the ballot, if I'm not mistaken.
All right.
Right, Barbara?
Pardon?
You'd have to modify the resolution for them to adopt to be able to put it on the ballot.
Right. We prepared the business license tax and the transaction and use tax. We do not have an updated one on the AVA fee or the TOT.
Okay.
But we did those previously in 2014, so it's going to be easy to pull back the 2014 one and just bring it forward. And so we could, if you wanted to adjourn it to this afternoon, we could pull out that language and present it at 1:30 today, because the language has basically been drafted previously.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest.
Makes sense. So the motion, I understand, is to bring back the TOT, vehicle abatement tax, and work with COG to develop a couple polling questions, and the other taxes to be discussed later on at future meetings. And then we'll continue this item till later on this afternoon to adopt the resolutions. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose?
No.
One no and a cough. What? No, I'm taking that yes or no.
Yes.
Okay.
It was an affirmative cough.
All right. So we have a 4-1 vote.
Very good. Thank you.
Supervisor Munns are voting no. Okay, thank you. So, all right, very good. Making progress. We'll move on to item 14.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll go ahead and take this particular item as our last item on the regular agenda today. It's regarding Fire Station 3, your board. I believe Supervisor Medina has asked for an update at the last board meeting, so we are going to go ahead and give the board an update. As you're aware, Rosa Murata and Fairview was the location for a potential Fire Station 3. It was discussed at the Fire Committee meeting on multiple occasions, as well as the Fire Chief's recommendation from the City of Hollister Fire Department. We've been working on this site for some time now. Your board later approved building the site. Also discussed the 1, 2, 3 bay apparatus housings for the apparatuses, as well as looking at the actual housing plans and addressing the floodplain. So up to date, your board has approved, or the actual finances regarding this expended is about $147,875. And at the January board meeting 123, your board amended a contract for architecture work through the direction of our director, John Girton, and his staff, Adam. They're continuing to move forward with that architectural work. So that should be completing. I have a plan here. Should be completing in March and April timeframe. Probably, it looks like here on the schedule, about April timeframe to complete that work. And then at that point, it will be then in the planning stage. And there's quite a few other stages that I'll highlight for the board. There will be project team response to comments. There will be comments made. Also, board will have to approve, the authorizing of the bidding process, board review, and then construction and completion. So this is what the plans are, have been provided through the RMA office, and the completion date is March or April of 2019. So that's the original plan. That's what has been planned out, and as of today, the work has continued, but there has been some concerns, and I just wanted to highlight this for the entire board with a new fire report that we received, I believe, last week. I think it was last Thursday, concerning the site, concerning the floodplain, concerning potentially putting the fire station at a better location within District 1, Supervisor Medina's district. So those have been discussions. There hasn't been any solidification from really the group or this board either of potentially moving that. But anyways, I just wanted to go ahead and bring that back to your board, those comments, and then maybe the board, the ad hoc committee may have a few more comments concerning that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. You want me to go first, Supervisor?
Yeah, go ahead.
We had a fire committee meeting last Thursday. Received a very detailed report by the consultant, and long story short, there's so much information there, and things to consider going forward. The committee feels strongly that we need to have a joint meeting between the two city councils and the Board of Supervisors to receive another presentation. I'm certain that, the council members and board members that aren't part of that committee will have a lot of questions, as far as the detail of that report. And in it also lists a number of options as far as how the three jurisdictions should maybe consider going forward with fire protection in the future. And that will be a discussion that would come back to this, to this board for our responsibilities. And part of it is whether or not we go forward with the construction of the site at Rosa Morada or consider another site in North County. Did I sum it up?
I think I would just add that it's very difficult. That site was determined or picked because it was a piece of property that the county owned. We were going forward, but when we hire a consultant and the consultant questions the site because of issues that the site itself has, i.e. flooding and getting out onto the road, we have to at least pause and definitely take it into consideration again. And I think we will have the opportunity as a board when we have this joint meeting for that to be discussed, joint meeting with the two cities. So no decision has been made not to build there. It's just, I think, because of what the consultant has said and questioned the viability of that site, it's just kind of in pause mode to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Medina.
I just have one quick question. This was voted on in October of 2015. It was a unanimous vote. At that point in time, did we not know that it was in the floodplain?
I'll say for myself, I didn't. I know some of the costs which we've talked about in our conversations, why we spent, a significant amount of money was, some of it was soils testing. And
so during that time, didn't they know that it was in a floodplain when you asked it? Because you're saying you only found out it was in floodplain when the new consultant for the fire feasibility study brought it up. But when we did any of the other work, it had to be known that it was in the floodplain, because that's part of the due diligence. That's the only question I have. That's where I'm concerned when we're saying this, we're worried about the floodplain, but it took 3 years to figure out it was in the floodplain.
I might be able to add a comment to that, and I don't know, RMA director is here. He's fairly new, so he hasn't been really part of the process. I do know that during this architectural phase, they have discussed actually raising the dirt up to accommodate the building. So with that being said, I believe that that's part of that due diligence, and knowing,
Yeah.
So I would say, to answer your question, but that's part of the whole design and kind of the architectural piece of it. Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, I've been relatively quiet today, a little under the weather. But yeah, I do have to, I understand, I appreciate all the comments and the source of frustration, but, just keep in mind, how many times did we officially make a decision and change our mind about the Homeless Resource Center? Several.
That's a good example.
We made several decisions to locate it in the southern end of the county, and then and so unfortunately this is a process that can be frustrating, and so I look forward to the joint hearing so we can learn more about options, we learn more about a suitable location if the current site is not suitable, and obviously keeping in mind cost and keeping costs down, obviously. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, I'll open it up for public comment. Anybody from the public? Seeing none. That was just a report. I appreciate Supervisor Medina bringing it forward. And we'll adjourn for lunch and reconvene at 1:30 for the resolutions.
Closed session.
Closed session. For closed session. Okay.
Closed session and that item.
Unless we want to work through lunch to... No?
Well, we can do a couple closed sessions now, but we need a little break before we bring back those resolutions. Because I need to go upstairs and pull out what we did in 2014.
Why don't we go ahead and take lunch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we could do a couple closed sessions.
Thank you.
But it's up to them.